Good morning. Good to be here with you this morning. Thank you for coming, and thanks to everyone who's with us online also. We thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you for your participation. Recently, I ran into an acquaintance, and she had just lost a good job, and because of her age and skill set, it was unlikely she would get another good job soon, if at all. And I knew this was a big loss for her, and she might struggle for a long time because of it. Yet she very quickly surprised me by saying to me, when we greeted one another, "When one door closes, God opens another one." Now, perhaps and probably I should have been impressed by her statement of her faith in God, but it actually concerned me. All I could think was this: Susan, give yourself the permission to grieve what you have lost. How are you going to move forward in a healthy way until you acknowledge the shock, until you allow yourself to feel the pain? You need to grieve the loss so that you can begin to recover from the loss. But I didn't say any of this to Susan. I just said, let me know how I can help, and we went on our ways. In the same way, I remember meeting a friend who I had not seen in quite a while, and I asked about her mother, and she told me her mother had died a couple of months before that time. Her mother was not very elderly, and I said how sorry I was that her mother had passed. But she quickly responded, "Oh no, we're all fine. She's in heaven." Again, I noticed that she seemed to believe that faith and grief were incompatible, that a person who had faith would not need to deeply grieve, and that a person who deeply grieves must not be a person of true faith. So let's think about for the next few minutes this topic, the need to grieve. The need to grieve. Why do we Christians sometimes talk and act as if grief is not something that people of faith need to do? Why do we Christians sometimes talk and act as if grief is not something that people of faith need to do? Do we really think that a person who has enough faith should not grieve at all? Do we think that a person who has enough faith, nothing will happen to them worthy of grieving? Do we think that a person who believes in heaven and the resurrection should grieve very quickly and discreetly and then move on with life as if that deep loss never happened? Well, if you or I have believed or spoken that people of faith have no need for grieving, then we have bought into a falsehood. And this no need to grieve falsehood will bring nothing good to any real people living in this real world in which we now exist. For real people living in the real world, people like you and me, we will face loss and pain in this life. Whether we believe in God or not, whether we have more faith or just a little bit of faith, we all need to grieve at times because we all will face very difficult times in this life if we are on this earth for even a short time. There are indeed, as you know, times of joy and happiness in life, and there are times of loss and sorrow. Love is a key ingredient in any good life, and whoever we love, we will feel great loss and pain when they are no longer right there with us. Love and grief go together. The deeper the love, the deeper the grief. This is a part of the life that God has given to us, the part of the life we find ourselves in here today. There's no getting around it. We will need to grieve. You can think about it, we don't have time to go through them in detail today, but you can think about all the people whose stories we hear about and read about in the Bible. We know of them as people of great faith, yet they actually experienced great pain and great loss. They did a lot of grieving. Also, the book of Psalms in the Bible was the primary prayer book and hymn book of the Jewish people in Old Testament times, and are now the primary prayer book and hymn book, the Psalms, of the church, have been since the times of the early church. And yet, as many as half of the Psalms are Psalms of lament. Lament, grieving. Many of the Psalms are Psalms of grief, Psalms of grieving. You can think about the King David, who wrote a good number of the Psalms, and many of the times when he called out to God in grief, in lament for his situation in life, when he was in danger, when he had suffered loss, when he suffered the terrible tragedies of the estrangement of his family. And if you still think that people of faith do not need to grieve, I remind you of Jesus. Jesus wept openly at the tomb of Lazarus, his friend. He was grieving there, even though he knew well that he would raise Lazarus in a few moments, and he knew well that eventually Lazarus would be raised in the general resurrection of us all. Also, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, just before he was to be put to death, he was facing great pain and loss. Such pain that, you remember in Luke it says, he sweated as if it were great drops of blood. We read in the Gospel of Matthew, a gospel we read today, but in another passage, in Matthew 26, we read that Jesus began to be grieved and was agitated. And it says a verse later, and he said to them, to the disciples and apostles, I am deeply grieved. This is Jesus the Christ, the Anointed One, the one we called Lord and Son of God. And he needed to grieve. The process of grieving is a necessary and healthy part of every life. Your life, my life. Everyone needs it. Grieving is necessary because loss and pain come into every person's life. No exceptions at all. Grieving is necessary, and it's also healthy because it can lead to a good measure of healing and recovery. It can lead to emotional and spiritual growth, and if we let it, to emotional and spiritual maturity. But grief that has not been felt, that has instead been pushed down, suppressed, repressed, not let out in healthy ways, can lead to unhealthy emotions, can lead to deeper, more damaging trauma, can lead to great damage in interpersonal relationships. One priest tells this story. He says this: some years back, a family lost a child in an accident. A lot of pressure was put upon them to have a celebration service, services such as you see many times. A lot of pressure was put on them to have a celebration service, to rejoice in the child's birth to a new life, the next life. But about a year later, their suppressed grief almost tore their family apart. And the priest goes on to say, speaking to all of us, we must not deny honest pain, nor jump quickly from loss to acceptance and skip over the grieving process. Christian faith does indeed proclaim a message of hope, but death and grief are still very much real. There is the need to grieve the losses and the pains that are part of every person's life, to bring healing and recovery. Now, grieving well does not necessarily mean, as a matter of fact, it doesn't mean that we get over deep loss and pain. Deep grief will always remain with us, for it's a reminder, as I spoke earlier, of the deep love we had for that person. Remember, Jesus, even after his resurrection, we learn, particularly from his encounter with Thomas the apostle, Jesus still had his scars and his puncture wounds even after he'd been raised from the dead. The traumas were still there visibly with him. So there may not be total recovery, no total healing, but the loss can, in a way, be integrated into our life. So it's there with all of our other experiences. So that eventually we can have love and joy even while that grief is still there with us. So we talked a bit about grief in general, and in closing, I'd like to mention a few specific reasons that you and I may need to grieve here today. You may have lost someone you loved, and that pain is still right there with you. Perhaps you need to grieve today over a medical diagnosis that will lead to pain and may lead to great loss for you or someone you love. There will likely be someone among us or listening to us who is facing a job loss or who has faced or is about to face great distress in their business. There'll be a marriage that is breaking apart. There will be an estrangement in a family. Perhaps the life you dreamed about and planned for is not the life you have right now. You need to grieve. We all need to grieve. All human beings need to grieve. Every one of us also needs to grieve over the COVID-19 pandemic that has killed and traumatized so many people in our country and is causing much pain and loss in the lives of so many in so many varied ways. And finally, we need to grieve because of the unrest and social anger caused by racial injustice and by a very divisive political atmosphere. The loss of peace and unity in our country is a real loss and a real reason to grieve. The reality of racial injustice causes great pain. So, as we close today, I want us to close by praying a psalm of grief, of lament. As we remember losses and pains, let us cry out to the Lord our God, sharing our lament with Him, calling out to Him, and let this grieving begin to heal us and bring to us a measure of recovery. Let this prayer of lament to God help to reorient us in the midst of these very unsettling times. A cry to God from Psalm 44 and Psalm 13. A cry to God. Awake, why are you asleep, O Lord? Arise, do not cast us off forever. Why do you hide your face, forgetting our woe and our oppression? For our souls are bound down to the dust. Our bodies are pressed down into the dirt. How long, O Lord, will you completely forget me? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I harbor sorrow in my soul? How long grief in my heart day after day? O Lord, our God, have mercy.